it's been a while, right? Like I think the last time I saw you was when I was at Cosamos back in Chicago, and you did a poetry reading. First of all, let everybody know who you are. Introduce yourself, and we'll get started, man.
Yeah, so I'm a truck driver, right? I'm Arturo Tootie, and trucking is what I do most of the time, most of my day. But aside from that, I write poetry, and um, I just recently started contributing to Latino Rebels.
Yeah, I mean, contributing is like that's you're fucking understating it, bro. Because like I just reread the first one you did in what was in November
Yeah,
about a wrap up of 2020, and I mean the writing. I mean, if people don't read a lot, and that's a problem, right? A lot of people don't read a lot, so they don't know how to judge a writer. They don't understand what a writer's doing, right? Um, I remember when I first when I first read Hemingway back in the day, right? I'm like, this motherfucker, like these sentences, this is easy. Like he's not doing anything special, right? But then you read a lot, and then you try to write like that, and you're like, oh, it's really hard to write like that.
yeah.
And I was just talking to the guest last week about that, about writing simply is so hard. And then you have like this, I don't know how to say his last name, Polochnik, the guy who wrote Fight
Mm-hmm.
Club and Choke and
Mm-hmm.
all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yes.
You kind of have that feel to you, right? Because you're like, you're writing really well, you're writing really simply, really direct. And then there's like this subversive, kind of like twisted, kind of like cynical mentality behind it, right? Where you're talking about, I'm talking about the November piece, where you're talking about how you drive a refrigerated truck and
Yeah.
how reading about New York and them filling up refrigerated trucks. You're like, I wonder. I drive a refrigerated truck. I wonder how much you have to keep your truck at, what temperature you have to keep up at for dead bodies, and what's the how many bodies can I hold in my truck before I hit the weight limit
Yeah.
capacity? I mean, and you're not overplaying it. You're not doing like any kind of like how Vice writes, like glorifying the absurdity or the sadness or the horrificness of it. You're just stating it, and that takes a lot of talent to do, right? Because an amateurish writer would try to play up that, right? Like I'm just here I'm just truck driver and I'm gonna glorify this twistedness, but you're not glorifying it at all. You're just laying it out.
Well, I think a part of that is that, it's not a character, it's my life, right? So it's like there's nothing to play. It's why when I introduce myself, I say I'm a truck driver because frankly, one of the things that bothers me is every time I talk to someone and I ask them what they do, they're always an actor or a rapper. They're always something, and then it's like, oh, but I do this on the side. I'm like, it's almost like people are embarrassed of what they do for a living. They're embarrassed of being a worker
Yeah,
when like pretty much everyone in the world is a worker.
yeah.
So yeah, it's not there's nothing to really like glorify or try to exaggerate. Like honestly, I'm alone in a truck all day. These are the kinds of thoughts that run through your mind when you're just kind of sitting alone.
I personally, I haven't had a regular 9 to 5 since I was a server, right? And I've been lucky enough that my wife makes a lot of money and she believes what I do. I call her my patrona.
I did
Um,
read that piece
yeah, she's my
because
patrona,
you
right?
wrote
So and
about
like
that.
and it's and then I'm not bragging, right? Like to especially to be a Latino man and you don't work, and she makes all the money. I mean, that's people think that I don't have any pride, like, oh, si vergüenza. No, I have a lot of pride, and it hurts me a lot. I'm just I see my shot, right? That I can write and I can do what I'm gonna do in media, and if I have to swallow my pride and let my wife, bring home the bacon, and she's okay with it, then that's what I do. But like, yeah, I mean, I'm constantly in awe of people like you who who have blue collar jobs, especially blue collar, right? Because it's not like you're in academia or you're some kind of like research assistant or something that is I guess engaging your intellectual skills. I mean, You're a blue collar worker, like my hero Bukowski, right? Was a mail worked in the mail office, or Philip Levine, who was a poet laureate who just died in like 2012. He was a blue collar worker, right? He worked at the Ford company in Detroit, and he wrote all this blue collar poetry. I mean, those are the people that I really admire. There's a guy in Argentina too who he cleans the subways, and he's like one of the best writers, short story writers in Argentina, right? Because being able to mix in with regular people, regular life every day, a writer needs that, right? And you see it all the time when like Junot Diaz's first book, when he was a real ass motherfucker, right? I think he moved pool tables.
Yeah.
And that's when he's writing all his best stories. But then when he's a fucking professor at MIT or whatever, then his writing starts to slip because he has his head up his ass. He's surrounded by academics, and they're all like, ooh, doing all this shit. And it's not real. It's not connecting with the real people, right? Because you're not mixing in with real people. You're in that bubble. And
he's getting handsy, or so I heard.
What's up?
I say he's getting handsy with people, or so I've heard.
Yeah, well, that's a different story. I mean, and that's, I mean, it's crazy how he's disappeared too, right?
Yeah.
Because he was like he was Superboy, right? Like everybody held him up. He was one of the first Latinos to win the Pulitzer Prize in fiction in a long time. He was on the Pulitzer board. Yeah. Professor at MIT, all that stuff. And now he's gone, right? Room 101. He is gone. No mention of him. What happened to Oscar Wilde? You'd hear that book all the time, and now you don't hear that shit at all. Yeah. But anyways, I'm excited to bring you on because your writing is, like, to go back to what we're saying, is badass, right? And really raw too. And I mean, I could just tell, like, again, and this is probably writer to writer shit, so probably people don't know like what I'm talking about, but like I could tell that you're a really good writer because like and I'm not saying that to like patronize you, but like the way you in that piece, and we'll get to the other one, right? We'll get to the Nicky Jam one, where you're talking about how your dog is, a good writer can juggle so many things in a small space, right? So you're talking about how your dad's sick. Then you're talking about like how, you just became an uncle. Was that your first time becoming an uncle?
No, but it's the first child for one of my sisters. I have 3 sisters. So I have one sister who's got 3 kids. So I've been an uncle, but then it was another sister that was her first baby. So it's a big deal still, right? It's like, I don't think I mean, even with my sister with 3 kids, if she gets another kid, it's still a big deal, right? But, and it's the first time in my life that like, how Latinos are, right? It's like family, like you got to be there for certain moments. And they're in California, this pandemic's going on, and I'm not there to meet this new,
and
you're
the
blessing.
Uncle, right? And this is your sister. So it's like, that's really important. That's an important role, right? You're like, as a brother, you're like the second father to the kid, right? I mean, the father's the father, but since it's your sister, you're you're giving male support to your sister, and you want to be a good uncle, right?
So it's definitely, I would say, one of the most difficult things working through the pandemic has been just feeling like I'm not there for my family, right? So when my dad's in the hospital, I'm not there, right? Then my sister's in the hospital because she's giving birth. I'm not there. Yeah. And it feels like, well, I mean, it's not like I don't help them financially. Right. I don't, I'm the youngest too, so it's not like they learned anything from me. I was learning from them.
Or that they're really relying on you, but you still feel that.
So it's literally like my only job is to be there when there's something important happens. That is the only expectation my family has of me. And the pandemic happens, and I can't even do the one thing I'm supposed to do. So it's and I mean, of course they understand, right? They're not like guilt tripping me. This is my own like guilt in my own head. That's like, man, I want to be there and I can't.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, it's like what I was gonna say. It's like my wife. She understands. That I'm trying to make stuff happen, and she's fine with it. But just because they understand doesn't take away the guilt that you feel,
Yeah.
right? That's just who you are. That's your character,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, you gotta be, oh, kill this person. It's okay. It's okay. You can kill this person. It's fine. You're not gonna do it. Oh, I guess it's fine. No, you have a fucking conscience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And no. So what I was gonna say is that you're talking about how you got two dogs. How's the dogs, by the way? Because in the one piece you said that the dog was sick, had some kind of diagnosis with something, was dehydrated.
He's got this condition. It's called Cushing's syndrome, which is basically his like hormones are all out of whack, right? And
what kind of dog is it?
it's a like Chihuahua mix, like Chihuahua and Pug mix, and it's a messed up disease where they're thirsty all the time, and then because they're constantly drinking, they're also like constantly urinating, and then their skin starts to develop sores, and they end up having untreated. They end up having like about a 1 to 2 year lifespan, and luckily for us, we've caught it where we've been able to get him on medication, and he's responded so well to the medication.
Yeah.
But that was like recent. That's like we started him on medication in November, and he's just like, all right, he's drinking normal now. I can see his skin is getting better, but he's still healing. But I can see him actually, like I could see him actually like living for a while.
Yeah.
And but he has to take this medicine forever. There's bad side effects to the medicine, so he has to go in like every 3 months to the vet to get blood work, just to make sure that like, all right, we're treating one thing, let's make sure we're not damaging something else.
Yeah.
And part of the stress too was we had insurance. One of the things when we got him was we got insurance for him, and the insurance wasn't covering it. And so I went through this.
So you're telling me that even the pets insurance companies fuck over pets?
They were calling it. They were saying it was a pre-existing condition.
Wow.
and yeah,
these
so like
insurance companies, man,
they don't
even do it to
cover
dogs, man.
And so for me, right? Like I have this union organizer background, right? So for me, it's like, look, if I want to build my case and I want to fight, like I know I gotta like line up all my ducks in a row. So we got a letter from his vet, we got a letter from his shelter, we got a letter from the medical director of some nonprofit, we got all of our medical records, we got the old medical records, we did an appeal, and then we lost the appeal still. So then I'm like, okay, let's do another appeal.
Yeah.
So we appeal the appeal, and it's just like it's a 4-month process. It's finally they're like, all right, we'll cover it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's like my savings is completely drained, right? Because I don't know.
And you
like,
do it to make a point too, right? Because like that they think, oh, they see your Mr. Alvarez, oh, he's just some dumb Latino, right? He's not gonna know how to do the paperwork and all that stuff. You're like, no, I'm gonna come at you, right? Like you think that I'm just like, oh, sorry, senor, okay, I'll let my dog die. No, you're coming back at it, And you talked about your union. You talked about your union organizing. Like in 2006, you were like, you got arrested for organizing hotel workers at the Hilton.
Yeah.
I met you, but I never knew that. What happened there?
Yeah. No, I was that's probably what I've done the longest, was union organizing. In 2005, I was fresh out of high school, went to Cal State Long Beach, thinking I was going to be a music major.
So you were born in Cali, out in Cali?
Yeah, I was out in Cali. And after about a month, after the first semester, I just stopped showing up to class. I just stopped showing up to class. And so I got, I dropped out before I could get kicked out, but I was going to get kicked out. And
they're
so
like, the dean's like, come to my office so I can kick you out. No, I've been out.
Yeah.
Come find me.
So I got a job at a hotel. I got a job at the Hilton. I was a banquet houseman, so just like setting up dance floors, setting up tables, like doing all the setup for events, making 6.75 an hour. Um, and the job sucked, right? I'm not gonna get into all the reasons why it sucked, but my coworkers and I, we organized the union and we won. And after winning, the union brought me on staff, right? So then I went and was doing that at other hotels as well and helping them organize. And I did that probably until, yeah, from like 2005 to like 2011, when I finally went back to school. Because for me, one of the conversations I would always have with workers was like, okay, you're going to work, you're taking your kids to school, you're paying your bills, you're cashing your check. What are you doing for yourself? Was one of the conversations I always had. Like, what's something that you're doing that's for you? And after a while, I just felt like a salesman because I'm having these conversations with workers, and I'm like, what am I doing for me?
Right.
And so it was like, dude, I need to go back to school. I need to do it the right way. And so that's how eventually I ended up back at Whittier College and with the history majors, right?
Nice.
Like that's I think that's where part of going back to the writing, right? It's like I read a lot of history, and part of the history is the best history is simple. I find that it's just like it's too complicated and you can't tell who's going to war with who and what time. It's like
story. The history story is important in history. You gotta tell a story, right? You ever been with somebody who tells a story and they don't know how to tell shit? They're like, no, you can't tell me that now. You got to introduce that before. Like, who's this person? Like, no, you got to be a good storyteller to tell good history.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, and I have it since once I finally, got my shit together and I graduated. I tried to organize for about a year after that, but I wasn't.
You were in Fresno or something like that, right?
I was no. I tried to do it here in Chicago.
No, didn't you get like arrested for organizing warehouse workers?
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, actually, you know what? Because I've been arrested twice, I can't. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. This is what I've heard is that I can't expunge my record. And that
the first time they assume that he just was wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
Second time they're like, this motherfucker.
Second time they're like, nah, you can't. No, you can't expunge it. So I have a record, and it became a problem when I did go back to school because I needed a job. I needed like, okay, cool, I'm in school in the day, but I need to pay my rent. And the only jobs I could get, like the only people hiring at night were, like a security guard for some parking lot, right? Or something stupid like that. And then I'm like, that's whatever. I could do that and do my reading.
Yeah.
It's in some ways it's a sweet gig. I could just sit there all day and do my homework. Except I have a record, so I can't even be a security guard, right? So, and it's like, these are connections I wasn't even making as an organizer. I'm like, here I'm getting arrested, fighting the fight, for my beliefs, and then it's like, it affects you in the long run. I don't regret it, of course, but it's just like when I was a union organizer, I never thought, yeah, I don't want to be a security guard. I don't want to do that with my life. But when I was a student, I'm like, I sure could have used those hours. Yeah. I sure could have used that paycheck. I one of the jobs I did get was as a janitor at LA Unified. It was at an elementary school, so I was at night just like mopping the floors, and I would have my own little like Goodwill Hunting moments, except that like it was just like 2 + 2, and I would like fill it out like 4, like, but.
Or diagram this sentence, and you're diagramming sentences on the board and shit.
Yeah, but it's just I've
But those are the best jobs, right? You sound like somebody who's in their head a lot, like, because that's how I am. And so to have like a menial job, I used to be a delivery driver, just a van. I used to go from all the way to like by Gurney, all the way to the city. It was like medical documents. Then I had to go to the VA in Hines.
Mhm.
But you just I like to drive because like it's actually not
Yeah.
a good combination because like I daydream, I think, right? I'm coming up building sentences in my head, right? And so it's good to have like a job where you can move around but not have to really think, right?
Yeah, that's what I was actually yesterday I was invited to go speak with the history majors at Whittier College, sort of letting them know that like folks who are graduating right now during the pandemic and they're freaked out, like what am I going to do for a living? I'm like, hey, look, like I don't use my degree for a living,
Yeah.
like I don't, I work next to guys who don't even have their GED, right? It's But I use my degree in other ways. I use my
Yeah.
degree in my life, and it's more meaningful that way. But anyway, one of the things I was telling them was that why I like driving is not because it's a great job. It's not because it's anyone's dream to drive a truck. It's like there's so much that sucks about truck driving. But what I like about it is that um, my mind stays fresh no matter how much my back hurts, no matter like today, right? I went in at work at 5 and got out at 4, right? So I did an 11-hour shift and it's -4 degrees and it's just like miserable. Uh, but I could read if I wanted to. I could write right now if I wanted to. My mind is not exhausted. My body is, but my mind is not. And that's a blessing,
And
especially I
just
think
being like I
for,
was gonna say, like I'm in Vegas now, right? I moved to Vegas in 2016, like, and I just realized how much of an effect being from Chicago and living in Chicago had on me, right? Because even in the cold, right? Like here, the weather's perfect all the time, right? So there's no stimulus, right? I go outside and it's the same as it is inside, right? But when you go, you're waking up early in Chicago and it's fucking freezing. It's that builds not only character but it's sensation, right? Like a writer has to feel things, a lot of
yeah,
different things all the time, right? And that inspires them, right? You can write a poem about being cold as fuck, right? But you can't write it if you're in Vegas, right?
yeah,
Like somebody was just sending me from Chicago. Somebody was sending me, "Oh, it's cold as fuck out here," and I'm trying to remember how cold I used to feel, and I'm starting to forget how cold it was. Like now, if it in Vegas, if it gets to the 40s, I'm cold. I'm freezing, right? But I'm like,
yeah,
man, I used to be out in like -20.
yeah,
No hat. In elementary school, no
yeah.
hat because like hats were for sissies and shit like that. You had your fucking frostbite on your ears, but you were fucking G. But now I people out here in Vegas, they're slow on the uptake because they're not used to everything so easy. The life is so easy, right? And that's great. But like the kids out here, like I'm so glad that I moved to Vegas when I was 31. Like, so I have enough Chicago in me, hopefully, to carry me through the rest of my days, right? And if I have to go back and get a dose of Chicago. And when I go back to Chicago, like the people there are awake, man. And just like you said, like being out and about, driving a truck, like that's better than being at home at a fucking desk, right? Like that's boring. That's not a life.
Yeah. I mean, I think I like the way you put it, like that a writer needs to feel, because I never put it that way, but I think that that's where that piece I wrote in November comes from, and that everybody's writing about essential workers, right? In 2020, like you couldn't open a website, you couldn't open a newspaper without seeing the word essential workers, but I didn't get a sense of what essential workers were feeling. I know what I was feeling, and I'm like, people were reporting on the numbers, and numbers are important. We got to talk numbers, right? But I didn't get a sense of the person.
Yeah.
Um, and they would talk about the numbers, and they would say, "And essential workers are heroes," right? And it's just like this is I'm not feeling this at all. And I wanted to write something that I was trying to capture what like this is what it's like to be me. This is what it's like to be out here right now.
And I think you said something like, we think, oh, essential workers are helping our neighbors and everything, and making sure like no, essential workers is sacrificing your neighbor, knowing that
Yeah.
like you made it sound like when there's a draft, oh our boys going over to fight in this war, it's a draft, they're heroes. It's a draft. You're forcing them to go, right? And you're calling them heroes, but you're forcing them to go. And you're saying, I like how you said, like, oh, I thought I was gonna stay at home and chill, and then my boss calls me like, oh, we got work to do, and you're like, oh fuck, like, fuck, like I'm an essential worker, and like, yeah, I'm helping, like. The other thing you didn't mention it, but you kind of bring it up where people say, "Oh, farm to table, farm to table, farm to table." You're the middleman in that, right? Nobody talks about farm, truck driver, table. They say farm to table, farm to table. No, a lot of motherfuckers make that happen, right? Yeah. So while you're talking about farm to table, there's there's people in the field working. There's the truck drivers. There's people working in the warehouses, factories. And they can't take a day off. And while you're saying farm to table, there's a lot of people that you don't even like. People have talked about it before. The invisible people, right? Galliano calls them the nobodies, right?
Yeah.
The people who make society run, but that society never sees.
Well, the farm. Yeah. What's funny about the farm to table is that it's a movement that's primarily exploded in urban centers. Right, so it's like, yeah, it's. I would argue that there's a middleman. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of middlemen anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere that there's farm to table, but especially in a place like Chicago or LA.
Because the farm is far from Chicago.
Do you see a farm? Where's the farm?
But that's like, exactly right. It's all theoretical. It's in their head, right? The farm in their head. Where there's a nice smiling cow and a smiling sun, and even the fucking broccoli's smiling when it gets plucked, right?
Yeah.
But not realizing, no, there's motherfuckers halfway around the country or across the country, and people leaving their families, truck drivers, days on end, so that you can get your fucking asparagus.
Yeah, I mean, I think and it might just be because you and I we're interested in writing, so we're also interested in words. But
right.
And I don't think everybody's like sort of thinking of what do these words mean.
Yeah.
Because one of the funniest things I remember seeing was and I'm delivering to a grocery store, and I just see this lady. She's complaining to customer service, right? Because she got these organic strawberries and there was an insect in them, and I'm like, well, do you know what organic means?
So the organic strawberries had some organic matter in them.
So do you want the pesticides or not? Because that's the only way you're getting rid of insects. And it's, but whatever, right?
But it's true, right? People want a big ass avocado. They want big ass beautiful bananas, but no chemicals. No chemicals. Yeah. People are just unrealistic, right? People are just kind of crazy, right? They're crazy in what I mean by crazy is that what they want is not reality. Like they're living in a fantasy, and that's crazy. That's the definition of crazy. You're living in a fantasy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, like, how did you get into writing? Like, were you writing as a kid? I mean, when did you decide like, okay, I'm going to be a writer?
Okay, so being from California, for me it was Tupac, right? And I understand right now. I'm in a place in my life where I understand that he was not the best rapper. I understand, right, that like West Coast wasn't everything, and there's a whole legacy of hip hop in the East Coast and then the South and Chicago, right? But when I was growing up,
right,
you couldn't like Tupac and Biggie. That's not the way it worked.
And now you can. Now everybody does, right? Everybody
now you can. Both. And now you can
people
compare
like Jay-Z
both.
and Nas.
Yeah, you couldn't do that.
No,
you couldn't do that. And
that's so
and not only could you not do that, if you were in California, you couldn't like Biggie. You couldn't even dare. So like, it's funny. Like, I found Tupac, and I feel like I found Biggie 10 years later, because you didn't even listen to Biggie, because you're just like, no, of course not. Right? Tupac is my religion, and Biggie is garbage.
Well, I was in Chicago, so Chicago had the best of both worlds, man. You could be a G Monday through Friday, roll with Tupac, right? Starting a revolution. But then when Friday night came, you're putting on Biggie. Now you pimping, right? Now you with Jay-Z.
But yes, but so Tupac was, and he was saying, uh, it wouldn't be LA without Mexicans, and every Chicano rap group sampled that, right? Like there was just every Chicano rap group just had at least one song on the album where Tupac is, it wouldn't be LA without Mexicans, and I found him at a time when I'm seeing violence in my neighborhood, so he's talking about violence. I'm going through puberty, and he's talking about sex, right? I grew up Catholic, so no one else was talking to me about sex other than if you think about it, it's a sin. That's the only conversation I had. So like at least not that Tupac talked about sex in a healthy way, but at least it was like, oh, here's someone's talking about sex, and I'm at an age where like I want to talk about sex, and here's a man who's talking about sex. He's talking about guns, and I'm seeing guns in my neighborhood, and he's talking about revolution,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, and I'm like, I see how hard my parents work. I got family across the border, and I'm seeing the injustices. I don't know how to put a name to them, but I'm seeing that like life's not fair. So Tupac was like, man, like, and he's writing poetry, and I'm like, yeah, and I could write poetry.
Yeah.
So my first
We all thought
poem,
we all thought we were the rose that grew from concrete, man,
yeah,
right?
yeah, my first poems were plagiarized Tupac.
Yeah.
And like my only excuse was that I didn't know the word plagiarism. I couldn't
Well, every
define
poet
it.
does
I
it. Every
couldn't
writer
spell it.
does that, right? I've tried to write like Hemingway. I've tried to write like I try to write like everybody. You know, it's been phases, but you have to do that. It's like training wheels, right?
Yeah.
You have to do that to find your own voice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, right? But I think that was, yeah, probably a good 2-3 years to where I was just, if I'm, I hope that that poetry is long gone. But if it ever does pop up somewhere, it's just like, oh, that's so Tupac, right? And then eventually, I don't know how I found Piñero, but Tupac was the first, and then Piñero was like, oh, and Latinos can do it too,
Yeah.
and that was like, that's cool. So I don't have to be black, right? Like I could be Latino and do it, right? And of course back then, like I didn't even know Afro-Latino or none of that, right? Um, but yeah, I found Piñero, and it was just like, all right, cool. Like let's write, and
Yeah.
that's how. So I've been writing poetry for a long time, um, but I was never submitting it anywhere.
Mm.
I was just I was going to open mics, and that was fruitful. People would see me at an open mic. Hey, I want you to come to this thing, and I want you to come do this over here, and it was just sort of word of mouth. And it got to a point where when people would ask me, "Hey, let me see something. Let me see some of your poems to try to get you into here." And I never had written poems, so I was a writer, but I memorized them.
Oof.
And part of that is that like uh, I love jazz and improvisation, and so I never do read a poem the same way.
Right.
And I like that I can just like I'll put a certain inflection here at this reading, but in this other reading I'll change the word, and that's sort of how I've done my writing. And for whatever reason, right around 2018, I started to just let me write for readers instead of for listeners. Let me write for readers, and that's when
Which is very different, right? I mean, it's related but very different.
It's so different. It's so different because the thing about writing for listeners, I feel like you have more control because I control the pacing. I control where my voice goes higher or my voice goes lower. I control it. When it's on a page, I can't control how you read it.
Oof.
I can't. And so it's scary. It is terrifying. And for me, like even writing a poem that I'm going to submit to like a literary journal, that feels vulnerable in a whole new different way because yeah, being on stage or in front of people and that's kind of scary, but I still feel like I'm in control. Like I'm a
They
magician.
get it from you. They get it. They get the feeling from you. You can bend the words how you want, right?
But when it's a poem on paper, like the line that I think is the best line is the line that you might glance over completely.
Yeah.
And I have zero control over that.
Right.
And so it's just it's scary, but I've been trying to force myself to do that, and so I've submitted a few poems, and then it's like, oh, they started getting published, and I'm like, okay, all right, I can do this, and it's like, and you do one and you're like, well, that was a fluke. I got to do it again, or otherwise it doesn't mean anything. You know,
Yeah.
I'm always feeling like, um, I
Imposter
believe,
syndrome, right?
yeah, it's imposter syndrome, and it's just like I have to just keep proving it. And
But that's what
but
makes
yeah,
you a
I've been,
writer, right? That's what makes anybody an artist, right? Because like, I mean, there's artists. An artist is not trying to be rich and famous, right? That's like a side thing. That's secondary. What they're trying to do is prove to themselves they have this dream, right? They want to write well, beautiful things, right? Like you said, you saw Tupac or you saw Pinheiro, you read it, you heard it, and you're like, man, that's awesome. I want when somebody hears what I say, I want them to feel the way I feel listening to Tupac and Pinheiro, right?
yeah,
And so
man,
you
yeah,
you spend the rest of your life, and even if you, like you said, even if you do it once, you're like, that was it real? Am I the master of my craft? Let me see if I can do it again. You're just proving it to yourself.
yeah, yeah. I think, and I also think that part of just like writing on what on paper or online, right? Like, but just words where you're counting on someone reading the words, is that you want to be good, but you also wanted to have a purpose. And I find when if I just were to do a spoken word piece, if it's entertaining, that's all the purpose it needs.
Yeah.
It doesn't need anything more other than like, hey, that was funny.
Right.
Um, and when I'm writing something, it can't just be funny for some reason. It can't. Like, it's gotta like, why am I sitting here writing this? Why am I asking you to read it? Right. And so that changes the dynamic completely. One of the writers I'm really into right now, you know, as much as I love Tupac because he's like he got me into this, but like the writers I'm into now is uh Kesey Layman, Kesey McCabe Layman. Um, Man, I think I'm butchering the name, but so let me spell it right. It's Kiese, and then Layman Laymon. Like that. Like I, he talks about in his book about the difference between writing for your people and writing to your people, and the challenge of trying to do both. And like that was like, right,
You just
that
blew
was
my
just
mind.
like,
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, you know.
Expand.
And so in the more recent piece, right, the immigration rights and Nicky Jam,
Yeah.
like that's where I was like the first time as a writer, right, the first time I'm consciously like, all right, like he showed me the way, let me try to emulate that. And so you know, in that piece when I'm talking about the journey, like an immigrant's journey, and like all the horrors to go with that, but also just like all the borders and all the logistics of it, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's writing for my people, right? Because my people potentially already know that. My people aren't learning something new, and maybe don't even like. It's Friday night. That's the last thing I want to read right now. You know, that's just you're just like re-traumatizing me. I'm writing that for like the white lady in Kansas who's like, I had no idea that there were immigrants that weren't Mexican, and I had no idea that there's this place called Ecuador, right? And so that's writing for my people. Writing to my people is Nicky Jam, is you know, shrimp fried rice, it's reggaeton, it's those are the pieces that's kind of like, hey, I see you, right? And like and you're fucking beautiful, right?
Right.
And it's like doing both of those in that piece was sort of I mean, it's my first time trying to do it, so I don't even know if I was able to do it, but it was just like, I want to try to write like this, you know?
No,
And
I
it's
mean,
like,
anybody. What's the name of it? Nicky Jam.
it's like immigration, rice, and Nicky Jam.
And it's like something out of the New Yorker, and I mean that in the good way. There's a lot of bullshit in the New Yorker, right? Fluffy purple passages and shit like that. But I mean, because you tell the story's gripping, right? When they're crossing the river, like the way you just again, the writing is from that earlier piece, right? Where you're just laying out this brutal scene, but you're not, you know, there's people who like to fetishize tragedy, right? But you're not doing that. You're just saying this is what happened, and
Yeah,
you're
it's
doing
what
it.
happened.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't. You know. But I'm saying like in a writer to restrain yourself as a writer takes a lot of skill and experience, right? And then you ended with it's basically three brothers, and I don't want to ruin it for spoiler alert. One dies, but you read the piece on Latino Rebels, and it's also singular, right? I mean, I feel like everybody's writing. The way I would like to write is exactly like how you're saying, right? For my people, to my people. The way I think of it is like I'm writing to you, right? A letter to you, and maybe somebody's, the white world will read it over my shoulder, or they'll overhear us, but I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And then I also want to be singular, right? I also want to do something like when you read one of my things, and you're doing this especially, right? When you read one of our pieces, okay, that has a voice. You can almost, like how Orwell says, when I'm reading something really good, I can almost see the author's face, right? They're kind of like grinning at me. They're knowingly grinning, like the Mona Lisa's face, like, but the author's face grinning at me. And like, it happens rarely, but sometimes you'll be reading something, and you're like, whoa, this is a voice. This is somebody wrote this, and they're talking to me. And you go, who wrote this? You got to go, what's the byline, right? Because usually we're so used to reading, the internet, social media, we're so used to seeing words on the screen, and like none of them are good. Most of them are trash, right? Everybody sounds like each other. The phrases, right? All the woke phrases, and everybody's trying to say the same thing. That when you come across a unique voice, it's so special. And then to be like, like how we are, right? Like Latinos from the working class, like we're not supposed to write like that. Like people go to the Iowa writing workshop. They pay tons of money to go to all these universities and they learn how to write well. They know all the fucking grammatical and syntax rules, but they don't have a fucking voice. And that is, can you teach voice? I think you can't teach voice, right? There's another, who is it? I'm gonna blank on her name. She's been having like a 30-year writing block. She wrote two books in the 80s. Anne Leibovitz. She says you can't teach writing. You can't teach writing. There should be no writing classes or at all. You're either born with, because writing takes a lot of things, right? It takes a voice, takes a perspective. You kind of have to be angry at the world, like right? Yes. Like the world, like if people could only take my advice, the world would be a better place. And so that's what you're trying to change the world, right? And so you have to have all these things, and you can't teach that. You're born with that, or you develop it very young.
Well, I'll say this. I like that you brought up the whole being able to tell someone's voice from their writing, because that's, I gotta say, that's probably reason one, reason two, right? Why I pitched to Latino Rebels at all. Yeah. And it's that one of the things that I respect about Latino Rebels so much, that I hold dear, is that it's a space that allows writers to be themselves. Yeah. And I read a lot of stuff on Latino Rebels I don't agree with. I read a lot of stuff on there that I don't like. There's
most of it I don't like.
That I'm like, you know what, this article sucks, right? And that's fine. It wasn't for me. It was for someone else.
Right.
But that's the thing. It's like it's not curated to the point where it loses who the person is. And I gotta tell you, like, I'm not the best writer in my family.
Really?
I'm for real. Like, it's my sister is. I got three older sisters. The one closest to my age, she is phenomenal. And she is like the person who took me by the hand and was like, dude, your writing sucks. And like, you gotta like you're messing up, right? Like I was, an ESL student my whole life until she fought for me in high school. I was a freshman. She was a senior. She was, the opposite, right? She was GATE program, honors, everything, AP, everything. And she finally had a meeting with her teacher, with my sister. She's like, my brother's not dumb. And like, he should, he needs to be in the honors program. And I never quite measured up to her. And when I see her writing, it's phenomenal. But here's the thing. She was writing before Latino Rebels existed. And there was this, there's, I don't want to say the name, but, there's not that many like Latino publications online, but it was one that was around before Latino Rebels, right?
Yeah, I probably was the editor there. I think I know what you're talking about.
And
now they make memes. Now they make a lot of money making memes.
And I was so proud that like she got this like internship there, and like I'm like, wow, she's doing what she wants to do. And whoever her editor was like would come, like their edits were always like they wanted to change her voice.
Yeah.
And so like they wanted her to write like this, like hi compa, I got some picante news. It's like that thing. It is like, bro, like now don't get me wrong, right? Like I think there's some,
if it's authentic, if you're putting Spanish in there authentically, if that's how you speak, do it. If you're throwing Spanish words at me to spice your stuff up, get the fuck out of here.
And we have look, I got cousins that legitimately talk like that.
Right.
And if they're writing the piece, beautiful, right? I think Gustavo Arellano kind of writes like that. And I think that's authentic for him. I think
you watch his podcast, that's how he talks, right?
Yeah.
That's who he is.
He talks like that. You see him when he's on Netflix, like he talks like that. That's how he writes. It's who he is, and it's right for him. But like you can't fake that.
No.
And like and why would you want to? And especially like that, to me, it's like, man, I wish that like she would write now. Like she just got so soured from that experience that she just kind of stopped writing. But at the same time, I'm also like, you know what? Like she doesn't owe it to the world either. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? Like all of y'all missed out. Like cause she's
But maybe like that's I don't know her, and I'm not throwing shade. I don't know anything, but like there's people who can write well, right? But what makes you a good writer, and what I'm trying to encourage in myself is that we're not the kind of people to do that, right? We're not the kind of people we'll take notes, we'll listen to your notes, but if you're trying to change our voice, through our writing, we're trying to be exactly who we are in real life on the page. And that's the hardest thing to do. And you can hide behind a fucking, hola, amigos, blah, 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 mi mama. Nah, you don't say that in real life. If you say it in real life, good. But if you're a good writer, if you're a writer and you read somebody saying that, that they're putting it on. And like, just to bring it back to Latino Rebels, the thing I like about Latino Rebels, like, yeah, I mean, I have dreams of writing for the Atlantic and the Nation and the New Yorker, right? But or at least I did. And then, maybe in the past few years, I realized they're never going to let me write with my voice, right? Julio, to his credit, right? And he has a lot of pressures on him, right? From the people who own Latino Rebels, right? To make it respectable, right? It makes money, so it has to be respectable. But Julio also likes exciting new voices, good writing, people who have a new voice. And so Latino Rebels is my home, right? It's like what Rolling Stone is, or especially what it used to be, right? A place where like if you can write and you got something to say and you're gonna put it down, as long as you're smart and you can write, you can go there. And but yeah, I mean we're almost coming up to the hour, and I thought we were going to talk about immigration, but I mean, I'm glad that we didn't. I mean, anybody who wants to, everybody knows what we think about immigration, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows, right?
Yeah.
We're Latinos, we're leftists, we're liberal leftists. I mean, I'm for open borders, right? I'm for, I think immigrants make America a better place. If you don't know that by looking at us and reading our stuff, then what? I'm actually glad that we talked about writing, because, like, again, that's the beauty of this podcast, is that, it's not about anything. It's not about anything. Every week, and the only reason I can do it is because I'm fucking crazy, right? so I can talk to you this week, and who knows who I'm going to talk to next week about who knows what, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think, again, to bring it back is I think what makes that the podcast successful or makes it work for me is that I can be who I am, right? And that's what makes writing for Latino Rebels good and for me. And I'm really excited like that. I hope you write more, man. How long does it? I mean, how do you? This is like a cliche. Like, how do you get your ideas? Like for me, I'm always just like, it's always in conversation. I'll have a conversation with somebody, and either it's an argument or somebody will say something, and I'll be, oh, that's a piece right there. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to my roots in organizing, because organizing is building relationships. And so part of, I have a lot of ideas of things for what I want to write about next. Like I actually have a problem where I'm like, I don't know what to write about next, because do I want to write this one or do I want to write that one? It's not
Well,
like
how do you choose? I usually have two, right? But how do you choose?
Yeah. I think I just go with whatever's fleshed out more. I mean, it's just a practical, like nothing exciting, right? Like it's just like, you know what, I'm ready. I could sit down and come up with a draft in one day.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And I'm a slow writer, right? So for me, I want to keep putting stories out for Latino Rebels, but it's gonna be like I might do one like every month and a half or two, because that's what it takes me to write. Right? It's from my first draft to the final draft. It's gonna be about 3 weeks, not including if I had to do an interview or research. Right? It's just I'm very slow about it, and the final draft is always way shorter too. Like it's just there's so much that I just chip away at and take out and take out and take out. But
writing is rewriting, right? A lot of writers don't know that. Like they think, oh, like that the first draft has to be so good. It doesn't. Just get it fucking out, right? Get it all out and then go back over and over and over again, right? And that's like you said, like that you said at the beginning of our talk that you every time you say a poem, you recite one of your poems, you change it. You're constantly changing it, right? And I'm the same way with like editing, right? And that's why, like I gotta just put it down. Like this guy, I can keep going, right? I can keep reading drafts of this that I just wrote and keep changing it, even if it's perfect, right? I'll say, oh, it's perfect, and then tomorrow I'll read it. Oh, change this. Oh, it's perfect. Next day, oh, change this. It's just that's kind of like our personality, right?
And I think that's what's scary. What was scary about like actually publishing something, because it felt so permanent. Yeah. And sure enough, I've gone back to look at the first poem I've published, and I don't like it. Like sure enough, it's like I thought it was ready at the time, and now I'm like, you know what I would do differently? And it's like, it's over, it's done. It's like it's there. Go write something else. But I think I'm always like nitpicking, and part of it I think is just it's that like English is my second language, because I went to undergrad here in the US, and now I have a better vocabulary and I'm more comfortable in English, but Spanish was my first language. And so it's reading in period, but reading in English was really hard for me in elementary school. Shoot, I don't know what the first sentence I ever wrote was, but I'll tell you the first sentence I remember was, "I will not speak Spanish in class."
Wow.
Right, like that's the first. That's like I had to write that 100 times right during lunch, right? So it's like because like with my friends, like we would speak Spanish, right? And of course, teachers always think you're talking shit, and we were, but like
yeah, we had the same rule. We had the same rule at our high school up in Wheeling. They made an announcement that like you can't talk Spanish in the hallways because non-Spanish speakers will think you're talking bad about them. It's fucking bullshit, man.
It's so it's so weird, but I mean all of that like just has led me to having so many like second doubts, about what I write. Like I just think it's not that I don't think it's good. It's that I just always feel like it's not the best it could be,
Of course
right?
it's
Like, so,
not. Of
you
course it's
know,
not. I just read this quote by Andy Warhol, right? Instead of, like he's like, instead of, deciding whether what you're making is art, just make it. Put it out there, let the people decide. And while they're debating whether it's good art or not, keep making more art, right? And to bring it back to the hip hop thing, I mean, we learned that from hip hop, right? Especially now, like these young rappers, the good thing about them, you got to give them credit for, is that they just keep coming out with fucking singles, right? They stay, the best ones, like Lil Wayne for that, what, a 10-year stretch, he was just in making mixtapes, man. Making
yeah,
mixtapes, just like, and like, because like if Lil Wayne only made 5 songs, you can judge the shit out of him. But now you can't even judge him, or Drake. Like I don't particularly like Drake, but his output, he's made a bunch of songs,
yeah,
and like that's the one thing I've learned to do is just like, you know what, like I used to like let perfectionism be the enemy of creation, right? But now it's just like just do something. I try to write every week for Latino Rebels. I try to make a podcast every week. And do I hate when the podcasts come out? Is my background wrong, or did I say the wrong thing? Did I stutter too much? Yeah, I fucking hate myself. I hate the way I speak, hate the way I look, hate the way I write. I could write better, I can look better, I can speak better. But you gotta fucking live, man. And it's better to create. Like if I didn't create, and if I was just like, oh, what should I do? What should I do? Man, I'd fucking kill myself, man.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, I need to do a better job of like reminding myself of that. And I surprisingly, like, you'd think I would be able to transfer that over to writing, because that's, I 100% see work that way, right? Like I always see guys coming in and like the hardest work, like I don't care about hard workers. The hardest workers are like, oh yeah, they work hard for 2 days and then they don't show up the third day because they're tired, right? Like it's, then there's always the people who are trying to outsmart work, right? They're like, oh, nah, don't work smarter, not harder. And it's like, let me tell you something. There's no smart way to unload a truck. It's hard work. You got to unload it. You can't, it's not a math problem to figure out. It's hard work. Do it.
Yeah.
And so what I value the most is people who understand, like in my team, is folks who understand that work is a marathon, and what's really rare is consistency. Someone could be fast, someone could be strong, someone could, whatever. It's the folks who are consistent, that that they're not going to call off, they're not going to show up late, they're going to be there. And it doesn't, even their mistakes are consistent, right? But you can count on the mistakes, right? Like, but folks who are consistent, like that's, man, those are the MVPs in the workplace, yeah. Right? Those are the people you can count on to come in on that Sunday shift, because they always come in on that Sunday shift, right? They come in on that early morning shift because they always come in on that early morning shift, right? And so I understand that about work. I gotta apply that to my writing, right? Like, it's just like,
it's all the same thing, man. It's all the same thing. Not only your writing, your life, right? Take it one day at a time, one thing at a time, right? Like when my father-in-law came last September to stay with us, he's from Juarez. And he's like, we're going to remodel the whole house. I'm like, man, how are we going to do that, right? And he's like, well, bit by bit, piece by piece. We redid the floors piece by piece, right? And we did the stairs step by step, right? Day by day. And looking back now, you're like, that really helped my writing. Like, just show up, man. Just show up, do the work. And then when you look back, and when people look at the work you've done, they'll be like, how did he do that? Oh, just step by step, piece by piece.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I'm trying to build myself up, right? And like just do, episode by episode, piece by piece. You try to like, you can have your eye on the long-term goals, but it's day by day, man. It's like, and not only I have ADD like a motherfucker, so I have to really schedule myself, because if not, I'm going to be going down rabbit holes in fucking YouTube or whatever, right? Like I got to really schedule myself to be productive, because that's the other thing about us. We daydream, right? You can't write the way you write if you're not fucking daydreaming, and somebody's like, are you listening? Oh yeah, and you're fucking writing a poem in your head, right?
I have, I think it's sort of I have the same problem as you, but for a very different reason, right? Like I'm not like ADD like that. I mean, even right now as we're talking, right? Like you're very like animated and energy. And I'm just like I'm barely moving. Like my heart rate's like, 10. Like I'm still, I'm 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 very like chill naturally, right? And so
I wish
like
I was like that.
for me, I could just like, what's a good day after work is if I could just sit on the couch and not do anything. Like that's great. That's
With a beer,
fabulous.
you're missing a beer, a
Oh
joint.
man,
Ooh.
I love just sitting and doing nothing.
Being with
Um,
friends, laughing your ass
yeah,
off.
I don't even need friends. Just just me like chilling. Like it's because then the friends start asking you questions. It's like and they ruin it. Like nah, man, just alone is cool. Um, but I mean, it's to the point even where like I've never really I never got into like smoking weed, right? Because I don't have like anything against it, nothing, right? Like but it's just because I'm already like that. Like
Yeah.
I'm already like I'm like, dude, you realize that like when I have tried it, right? Because there's always like, oh, but you gotta because you had some garbage stuff, so you need
Yeah.
to try this one or you need to try this. This is the one that gives you energy. No man, whenever I've tried it, like I'm just like I'm zoned out because I'm like, oh, you don't understand. That's like my natural state.
Yeah.
That's my natural state. So
That's
like
why I smoke, man, because
you
I'm
know,
trying to get like you. But that's the reason why I don't do coke. Because if I did coke, I'd be bouncing off the fucking walls, man.
and the reason I don't do coke is because I like that I would do every day.
You're like, damn, I feel like Superman up in this bitch, man.
Yeah.
But thanks, Tootie, for coming on, man. Let everybody know where they can find you and obviously find your work and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm pretty new to Twitter, so I need friends on Twitter, man. So
Yeah.
like,
Follow
hey,
Tootie, man.
come find me on Twitter at Tootie Alvarez. But then obviously, yeah, on Latino Rebels, read my stuff. Send me hate mail. Uh, yeah, give me something to read.
Isn't it great being like a real ass motherfucker? People send you hate mail or send you hate comments. You're like, I don't give a fuck about you. I don't know you. You think you hurt my feelings? You don't know what hurt feelings are, motherfucker. Like, we have real ass lives, real ass upbringings where we were really hurt, right? Like somebody saying whatever the fuck they say on social media is like, get the fuck out of here, man. You sad. You're a sad motherfucker.
I can't imagine how much hate mail you get over the whole Latinx your Latinx writing,
I'm a
man.
homophobe. I'm a transphobe. I hate women. I hate Latinos. I hate everybody. Like, get the, you don't know me. You're just people are angry. People are really angry, and I don't blame them because society's fucked up. The world is fucked up, and they need to yell at somebody, and they don't know. Maybe they don't understand how they're getting fucked. They just feel it, and so when I come along, I'm just easy, right? I'm this black Latino guy saying, "Oh, Latinx, don't use that. You can't say that. You can't, whatever." But
Well, it's yeah. I think people mistake having a difference of opinion with like someone being wrong,
yeah,
right? And I think that's one of the problems. Like, I like the word Latinx. I use it.
yeah.
I've read like everything you've written about it. I don't think anything you've written about it is wrong. I'm like, I actually agree with your logic. I agree with your points. I think that there are already, yeah, you explain in your piece that like Latino is already gender neutral and the
When
reasons
I say
why.
Latino or Latinos, I mean everybody. I'm not
Yeah,
excluding I'm not an asshole. I'm talking about everybody. Trans, everybody.
yeah, and yeah, like I see his argument. It makes sense. It checks out. Like what's the issue, right? Um, but I think people just like they're not even looking at it at that level, right? Like, what is he arguing? They're just
It's
like,
teams.
oh, he's different than me. He's
Yeah.
different than me.
You're not
You
on my
know,
team, then you're my enemy, right? And then like, the other thing is, oh man, what was I gonna say? Like, yeah, it's just teams. Like, you have to be wrong, and that there's no right or wrong with like oh yeah, as an editor, I have my own website, right? So like, if somebody writes for me and they use Latinx, I'm not gonna change it. You use Latinx, use Latinx. Use whatever
yeah,
terms you want. Especially, I'm a writer's editor, right? So I'm just trying to. I'm looking for clarity. But whatever the fuck
yeah,
you say, and if it's smart and it's well written, say it, man. I'm not gonna pick your words for you. But people think like, why do you care about Latinx so much? I don't. I really don't. Right? Call yourself whatever you want. Just don't impose it on me. And then nobody's imposing it. Nobody's imposing it. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I see Latinx in media. I see it everywhere. And then when you that doesn't square with me with the fact that most people don't use it or know what it is or identify as Latinx. So I'm like, okay, why am I seeing it so much? But anyways, I don't really care. But we ended on that. Thank you so much. I know you had just gotten off a shift, and so thank you so much for working Thank you for working. I know you're an essential worker. Thank you for that. Thank you for your service. But man, I'll keep in touch with you, and I'm sure like everybody else who read your 2 pieces on Latino Rebels, they're waiting to read the next one, man. Just keep writing, and we'll be in touch, man. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Peace.